After her husband died, Leah and her daughter Jessica moved out of state with a man who hadn't shown Leah what kind of person he really was until they got there. The constant abuse and bad treatment caused so much pain and fear, which led to unexpected and in the end, extreme results. This is an example of how caring about someone, even if they are a stranger, turned out to be much more than just a nice thing to do. It is a thing that can save lives and give new meaning to those lives. In today's heartwarming story, we'll find out how Jessica ended up in an old man's home and what she found in the barn behind the house that changed her life forever. Leah was making dinner and little Jessica was in her bedroom playing with her toys, since it was past the time her father usually got home from work. The girl went to the kitchen to ask her mother when he would be home. Leah, the girl's mother, smiled and told her to wait. Her father was working on a big project and had to work hard to bring in more money for the family. He'd get back as soon as he could, but that night, as the hours went by and her husband still hadn't come home, Leah tried to stay cool. However, the flutter in her chest kept getting faster and faster. When the phone finally rang, Leah got up quickly to answer it. Little Jessica went to her mom because she thought it was her dad calling to say he would be at work late. But the girl saw a change in her mother's face. She was no longer calm, but instead she was scared. When she started to cry and cry and cry. Peter, her husband, wasn't the one who called, but it was their boss who told them about the tragedy. Peter had been killed in an accident at the industrial building where he worked. Peter was standing on a scaffold, which shook and threw him off balance. Peter couldn't get himself attached to the power wires he was putting in, so he fell 10 meters. Jessica would always remember where her father was buried, the guilty looks of his co-workers, and the sadness of his friends, and Leah's silence, because she was too sad to say anything else. In a way, it seemed like nothing was happening, and the little girl would finally wake up from her nightmare. Jessica wasn't asleep though. This really happened. The young woman didn't accept that her father had died until a long time after his death. Without Peter, it was very hard for the mother and daughter to take care of themselves. Leah worked hard to make sure she didn't run out of anything at home, but even after paying the rent, the money wasn't enough to meet all their needs. Jessica and Leah had to cut their spending way back and get by with just the bare necessities. When Leah met Jack, a man who was 10 years older than her, she liked him and stuck to him like a life jacket thrown to a person who is drowning. Part of the reason for this was that Jack had talked Leah into moving with him to a town in Oregon where he owned a house. Leah and her daughter had no chance of getting better, so she figured she had nothing to lose by trying. Leah took Jessica and the rest of her things and moved into the house of her new boyfriend without giving it a second thought. Leah had no idea what would happen when she went to another state with a man she had just met. Jack was honest about the Oregon house. It was a nice place for the three of them to live. Jack did not tell Leah, however. He was an alcoholic. Maybe he forgot to say that, or maybe he didn't say it because he didn't think anyone in his company knew there was a problem. But as Leah and Jack lived together longer, the man of the house got drunk more often and lost track. Leah stayed strong as long as she could and tried to help, but it was hard to get Jack to see that he really did have a problem. Also, Jack would often use his hands to prove his point when he was drunk. He also sometimes made threats. Sometimes Leah really hurt herself. He would sometimes talk to Jessica, who grew up very quiet and shy. After seeing the guy hurt her and her mother so much, Jessica was quiet, but she wasn't stupid. She knew something was going to happen. After all, there are effects. Is that right? After the years went by, Leah's health started to get worse because of the abuse at home. After another fight with Jack, Leah had sharp pains in her chest one night. Jessica, who was 15 years old at the time, couldn't help. Leah fought until help came and took her to the hospital emergency room. Even though the doctor did everything they couldn't stop Leah's heart attack, which killed her. So in just a few minutes, Jessica was left without a family and sent to live with a man who was crazy and dangerous. Jack drank even more when Leah wasn't around, making the girl's life a living hell. Jessica stayed like this for 3 years. She didn't know how to change the situation and didn't know who to talk to. She had a bag ready in case she had to leave quickly, but she had nowhere to go and thought the police wouldn't take her seriously. If that happened, Jack would be even more angry before he even drank a drop. In the past few months, Jack had been staring at Jessica in a strange way and using words that Jessica knew very well. Jessica texted her friend Kate and told her everything she was going through because she knew things could get much worse. The friend stood next to her and told her she could help. Kate was her very last option. The same afternoon, when Jack got home from work, he had more drinks than normal, which made him even more angry. He went to Jessica's room when he was very drunk and pushed the door open. He charged at the girl, but she was faster and able to avoid him. Jack tripped and fell roughly on the bed, breaking his nose and making it bleed. Jessica ran out of the front door with her emergency bag in hand, leaving Jack behind. When he was drunk and angry, he yelled that Jessica was nothing but a rude tramp. He said that she had forgotten how he had kept the girl safe, fed, and dressed for so many years. But Jessica ran away without turning around. Tonight, she wouldn't have to go through that hell for another second. Jessica was received by Kate. Jessica knew she couldn't stay there forever, but the next day she started looking for a job. At first, no one would hire a young woman with no experience, but she kept trying and eventually got a job at a coffee shop as a cashier. It wasn't much money, but it was something. She did well with her chores and didn't waste any time getting people's attention. William, a student at one of the best colleges in the country, was the young man who seemed like the new worker the most. William was always able to get what he wanted, so when he saw Jessica, he thought he would do anything for her. He starts conversations, kept going to the cafeteria, and always said nice things about Jessica's work. Within a few months, they were dating regularly, and Jessica started going to William's house often. The trouble was that William's mother never liked Jessica, and she never missed a chance to tell him how Jessica's life was no different from theirs. The fact that the girl didn't have any parents or other family who cared about her was a big problem for her. The mother thought it was fine for William to stay with Jessica for a while, but she felt nervous when she thought about the chance of them getting married or having kids in the future. What happened next was something she could never have predicted. Just 3 days earlier, Jessica told William that she was expecting. The man was scared to face his family, but there was nothing he could do. After all, everyone would soon see that the girl's belly was getting bigger. Then, Jessica moved into William's house, which she planned to stay until she gave birth. At first, William thought that his mother's relationship with his girlfriend might get better when his grandson came to live with them. However, things only got worse. Peter was born, but for the next 3 years, things didn't go well for the family. When William ended college, he got a job at a big company in town. He left Jessica in charge of taking care of their son. Jessica had to listen to her mother-in-law lecture and scold her every day after that. "This isn't my child," she said once. "You lied to my son, but you won't be able to fool me. This boy has nothing in common with my son." Jessica didn't fight back against this nonsense, because she didn't want to make things worse. Instead, she spent all her free time with little Peter. Still, when she thought about what William's mother had said, she would cry with her face in the pillow at night. But the big blow came when it was found out that William was having an affair with his boss. He didn't even try to hide the fact that he was sleeping with a woman who was older than him. The boss liked younger guys and told him she would help him move up in his job. It was another terrible thing that Jessica had to go through. This time, where would that take her? She had no idea. Jessica packed her emergency bag again and took Peter with her to her friend Kate's house. She didn't say why, because she knew they no longer liked her. Kate was happy to see her, but told her they couldn't stay long this time. She would wait though, until Jessica found her own place. Jessica didn't have time to look for a better job because she had a lot on her mind and a young child to take care of. In the end, she went back to work at the cafe as a cashier. Things that she used to do without thinking were harder for her now. It was hard for her to work and take care of a young child at the same time. She often went to work with dark circles under her eyes, trying her best not to fall asleep right away. The cafe owners didn't like how things were going, and her customer service skills weren't getting people's attention like they did years ago. But would luck at least once in her life be on her side? Jessica was hopeful. An old man fell into the canteen one day. The business owner didn't like what he saw and told the drunk man to leave because this wasn't the place for him. The man was pale and wouldn't take his hands off his chest. He couldn't really say what he wanted to say. He seemed to be choking, and then he fell down. The customers and canteen workers looked at what was going on and didn't understand. Jessica was the only one who did something right away and called for help. He recovered because this young worker and the relief crew were good at what they did. His name was Oliver, and he had just had a heart attack. Oliver went back to the restaurant after the situation was over, and he was back to normal to find the people who made the emergency call that saved him. The old man thanked Jessica and asked what he could do to repay her. Jessica said that when she was young, her mother died of a heart attack, and she didn't expect any credit for what she had done. The man was touched by her story and wanted to hear more. Then Jessica told him everything, including all the problems and pain she had been through to this point. That day, Oliver went back to the lunchroom. He now knew how to thank Jessica properly for saving his life. "I live alone in a big house," Oliver said. "I don't have any children or a wife. Come live with me. Peter and you here. Stay as long as you need to." After thinking about it for a while, Jessica decided to say yes. Oliver made some changes to the deed, and in the end, he decided that Jessica and Peter should be able to own half of the house. Peter liked the man and all the space they had to move around, play, and look around. Oliver's health wasn't as good as it used to be, and he got sick out of the blue. 3 months later, he grabbed Jessica's hands and told her that he had left her the house in his will because he thought this was the end of his life. But that wasn't the most important thing. So, he told Jessica something that would change their lives in a basic way. In the back of the house is a barn. There is a bag of tools in the barn, and behind it you can see a box. Everything in it now belongs to you and Peter. When Jessica told the man to hold on, the man's hands went limp. After she ran away to call for help, the ambulance took Oliver to the hospital. The medical staff were able to calm the man, but because his health was getting worse, he had to go to the operating room as soon as possible. Because the treatment was expensive, Jessica didn't have the money she needed to pay for it. After she remembered what Oliver had said, she ran to see what was in the barn behind the house. She had never been there before. When she turned on the light, she saw the tools on an old table, but no box. It seemed like a long time had gone by since anyone had been in the barn. She looked more closely and saw that the dusty box was on the floor. She opened it and saw an old, small rag covering a bag at the bottom. She took off the towel and saw gold flakes. She knew right away she was going to pay for Oliver's surgery. Later, Jessica found out that Oliver had gotten the gold nuggets from his son, who disappeared in an Alaskan mine a long time ago. The gold was in a box because he thought it was cursed. After his wife died, he had even more reason to think that the nuggets were a bad sign. He took them out of the house, but in the skilled hands of Jessica, they turned out to be real lifesavers and gave him one more chance at life. Oliver was the kind of grandfather Peter should have had for the rest of his life. He also cared about and paid attention to Jessica in a way she hadn't had since she was a child. He treated her like she was his own daughter. In the end, none of the bad things that happened to her were enough to make her miserable and alone for the rest of her life. Please click like if you think this video is funny. Check out our next touching story that's showing up on the screen right now.